Here's the Ramones in an interview from The Tomorrow Show.
I'm talking to the Ramones right now. Joey, Johnny, Judy, and Marky, you have your people here with you.
You got the best fans in the world, you know?
Well, I guess so. They love you. And by the way, your names aren't really Ramon. You just didn't know.
Coincidence.
You never. It's a coincidence.
Yeah.
You just all happen.
When we met in the elevator, we all have the same last name.
You never give your real names, but you don't want your mothers to be subjected to that.
Disgrace. Right.
Yeah. How did you?
My mother just left the country, you know.
How did you get together with the guy?
We started like summer of 1974, and we grew up together, lived in the same block, we were friends. Something we always wanted to do.
It's an unnatural phenomenon.
Can you see?
Yes. Well, yeah. Don't do it there.
Okay.
It's not the right spot, you know?
All right. And by the way, you know.
I was meaning to get a haircut.
You didn't have time.
No, it's too many things to do, you know.
You started back in the mid-'70s. I want to know.
I was going to type out a lyric sheet for you tonight.
I have it. We want the airways. This business is killing me. The Ku Klux Klan is stealing my baby away.
Yeah.
And teenage lobotomy. Yeah.
You got it all.
I got it. I got it. And you're doing really well with it. But you started punk, kind of.
Well,
we consider it genuine rock and roll, you know, from the gut, you know.
rock and roll was meant for punks, and that's it started.
I guess Elvis Presley started
in the
mid-50s.
Yeah, but punk is an answer to all the glitter and the stuff that costs a lot of money.
Punk is just a rebellious rock for all kids, all of them.
Real rock and roll was punk.
Not a bunch of old men playing music for your mothers and fathers. That's what you have now, is what they call rock.
For instance?
Stick.
Yeah, Sticks, Kansas, Foreigner, stuff like that. Your parents should listen to this.
Is it mellowing
My
out?
mother doesn't even listen to that.
Your mother's more hip than that?
Yeah.
It's just they just want to clean up music and just push mediocrity on the on the public.
So you're back to your tattered jeans and your sneakers and your leather jackets and nothing fancy. And just
Well, we just want to be real. We want to be ourselves and not put on a bunch of phony clothes.
Yeah, but wait a minute now. Is this real?
Yes.
Well, we wore what we always wore.
Yeah, no, but isn't this a uniform too? I mean, we all have
We
the
went
same jacket
over
on.
it. When we started the group, we were talking about what we were going to wear. You know, when we started thinking about it, and we just decided to wear what we had.
This is what we were wearing before we were in the band.
We were thinking of getting dressed up and all that too, you know, and then we decided not to.
All the big rock stars are wearing what we wear now, like Billy Joel, they're wearing their leather jackets and
The Ramones took their name from a pseudonym that Paul McCartney had used to go by during his early Beatles days, Paul Ramon. Like the Beatles, the four guys in the Ramones also had very clear identities. Tommy Ramone was the band's big picture guy and producer, but was later replaced by Marky Ramone. Johnny was strong-willed and leaned politically toward the right. He was also the band's de facto leader. He shaped the band's musical style with his bar chords and downstroke. Dee Dee wrote a lot of their songs, and through them he revealed his self-destructive personality. And then there was sensitive, introverted Joey, the band's other key songwriter, with the quasi-Buddy Holly hiccuping vocals. The guys released 14 albums during their career. Their first album, The Ramones, was the best-selling one, although it took nearly 40 years for it to finally hit gold status. Yeah, that's 40. Critically loved and an influence to scores of other punk bands, somehow, radio ignored it. So even though the Ramones remained a cult band, this album still laid the foundation for many future punk bands and their albums, fast tempos, simple arrangements, and catchy melodies. It shaped the entire genre. Another interesting one from them was 1980's End of the Century. The CD reissue of this one has Rock and Roll High School on it. produced by Phil Spector, this one had more of a mainstream sound. So a lot of people felt like they were straying from their roots, but maybe that was the point, seeing as they failed to crack the code dollar-wise by that point. For sure, the Ramones had more success than the New York Dolls. But like the Dolls, I think that the Ramones had an outsized influence on other artists, and I think that this is where their true importance as a band is. For instance, in 2014, U2 paid their respects when they released The Miracle of Joey Ramone. Bono remembered the first time he had ever heard the Ramones and sang, "The most beautiful sound I'd ever heard." Reflecting on this kind of thing, Joey Ramone once said, "Everybody's just emulating us, and now everybody just kind of takes our sound as their foundations." Recognition is nice to get. Success would have been even better. In an alternate universe, songs like "Sheena is a Rocker," "I Want to Be Your Boyfriend," "Teenage Lobotomy," "Rockaway Beach," "I Want to Be Sedated," "Psychotherapy," "I Believe in Miracles," and "The KKK Took My Baby Away" woulda, coulda, shoulda been as familiar as "Can't Buy Me Love," or "Satisfaction," or "Happy," or "Shake It Off," or any other impossible to not hear songs you might care to throw out there. In 2002, 6 years after their last album, Adios Amigos, the Ramones were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was 1 year too late for Johnny Ramone, who died of lymphoma in 2001. Another honor was given the band when they received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2011. But by that time, Joey, Dee Dee, and finally also Tommy had all passed on as well. Johnny's wife, Linda, was there, and she spoke in his honor. And here's what she said.
Good afternoon. Well, my husband loved being Johnny Ramone. He invented his own guitar style, which became the sound of the Ramones. He influenced guitar players all over the world. This Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award is perfect for one of the best rock bands of all time, the Ramones. Thank you so much. God bless America, and God bless Johnny Ramone. Thank you.
I'd like to say a few words about Dee Dee Ramone. Dee Dee Ramone was the most influential punk rock bassist of all time and the most prolific punk rock songwriter that the world will ever know. He was a musical mad scientist, an outsider, and a tortured genius. Dee Dee personified punk before anybody even knew what it was, as did the Ramones as a band. But early on, punk rock got a bad rap, and misconceptions falsely attributed to it kept the Ramones from being fully recognized for their brilliance until decades later, until moments like now. Johnny Ramone once said that the Ramones weren't against anything except for what rock and roll was becoming. The Ramones wanted to save rock and roll, and the Academy's recognition of their lifetime achievement is further indication that they did. I've always seen the Ramones on the pedestal that you see them on now, so it's with great pride, honor, privilege, and personal satisfaction that I accept this award on behalf of one of my heroes, Dee Dee Ramone. His wife Barbara thanks you, I thank you, and in closing I'd like to say thank you, Dee Dee. You're very wonderful, you're immortal, we all love you, and in your own words, good bunnies get the carrots. Thank you.
I can't seem to
Talking Heads were another one of the great New York City punk bands. In the early 1970s, 3 students named David, Tina, and Chris all met while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. They used to collaborate on these totally off-the-wall art exhibits, but were, in fact, introduced to each other by a mutual friend who needed help with the soundtrack for a student film. These guys eventually were known as the Talking Heads. The song we're listening to, Psycho Killer, was one of their earliest collaborations. Their next big move was leaving Rhode Island and settling into New York City. By 1975, Bern, France, and Weymouth were spending most every day practicing in the 9th floor loft of a building in New York City. At night, they were hanging out at a punk club called CBGB, Country, Bluesgrass, and Blues, where the Ramones frequently played. The Heads actually got their first gig at CBGB when the owner of the club, a dude named Hilly Crystal, asked Johnny Ramone if the Heads could open up for them. And Johnny's answer was, sure, they're gonna suck, so no problem. In '76, Jerry Harrison joined the band, invited in by Tina Weymouth. It wasn't too long after this that the Talking Heads were signed to Sire Records, and then, just a year later, they recorded their album Talking Heads 77 at a studio run by John Bon Jovi's cousin. 77 didn't do all that well, but it did have Psycho Killer on it. This was the summer of the Son of Sam killings in New York, and in a twisted kind of way, it helped get the song some airtime and recognition. Of course, it's a classic today. For anyone lucky enough to have seen the Stop Making Sense tour live in the summer of '83, I was there, or even to see the video in the many years since then, you'll remember David Byrne coming out on stage with this big boombox cranking out the drum track to the song. Dressed in that gigantic white suit he wore, it was a hell of a way to open the concert. The album did nothing sales-wise in the US, and it only made it to number 60 in the UK. But the Heads stuck, at least technically, to the stripped-down simplicity of punk rock, a long way from Guitar Hero music. No self-absorbed or self-impressed guitar solos, no long keyboard jams to muck up the Heads' cryptic music. On the other hand, you also didn't get what was becoming in other bands a cartoonish routine of 3 or 4 thrash chords in anger.
And you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down.
In 1980, Byrne and the band were turning heads. See the pun there? See what I did there? Turning heads. With their release of Once in a Lifetime, a song that sprang from a studio jam and inspired by the music of African artist Fela Kuti, that their producer Brian Eno had turned them on to. In an NPR interview, Eno said that he, quote, thought that was just the most exciting music going on at the time, end quote. The song was on their album Remainin' Light, and we're listening to it now. I love the rhythmic layering that was done over Tina Weymouth's unforgettable bass line. In a great way that sort of underscores the African inspirations of the song. Byrne's singing is classic call and response. We talked a lot about call and response and how it was integral to the early African American music found on plantations. You can get a lot more on that by listening to episodes 7 and 9 from season 1, back in April and May of 2021. Links are provided in today's show notes. In another NPR interview, Byrne talked about the largely unconscious, his words, way the song came to life. He said, We operate half awake or on autopilot, and we end up, whatever, with a house and a family and job and everything else, and we haven't really stopped to ask ourselves, well, how did I get here? Let me tell you. You see, I just became a grandfather, and that feeling is one that I've been experiencing in waves lately. Life just happens, you know? Years later, the Talking Heads were back again with their album Speaking in Tongues, which had their only top 10 hit, Burning Down the House. The song set the tone for the record. Embedded in the album's core, the Heads were still playing their angular art school vibe, but on top of that, they'd laid on heavy R&B and soul overtones. Here's David Byrne again to tell us how he came up with the concept of that huge white suit and Stop Making Sense.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to the program. My next guest was here once before with his band Talking Heads, and it's a pleasure to have him back. He and the band are the stars of a great new film called Stop Making Sense. From Talking Heads, please welcome David Byrne. Yeah. How long ago were you here before, you and the band? A long time, wasn't it?
I think it was at least a year.
About a year. Nice to have you back again.
Nice to be here.
I saw the movie 2 days ago. It's really terrific.
I heard you saw it all by yourself.
I did. It was not because of poor turnout or anything. It was they were kind enough to let me come in early, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. Explain what we saw there? Stop Making Sense. That's the title. What does it mean?
It's good advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's an advice not to be rational all the time.
Yeah. And this movie was your idea for a concert film?
Yeah, I wanted to capture the show, and the director, Jonathan Demme, approached us at one point and said he'd like to direct it and film it.
Yeah. You're a very interesting performer to watch, in addition to the music being terrific, but you're very interesting to watch. You do, it's going to sound strange, but, well, like I'm telling you what you do, but, you do peculiar things on stage.
I've been reading about that.
For example, what we just saw there in the clip, banging yourself in the head.
Sometimes, should I demonstrate?
Please do.
Sometimes I actually hit myself on the head, and sometimes I fake it. This is if I really do it, you can hear a sound. And if I don't, it doesn't make as much of a sound, but it looks about the same, I think.
It looks about the same. But I'm guessing unless the audience actually hears the sound, they feel cheated, don't they?
Yeah, you bet.
In the opening of the film, when you come out and you do the song, and then while they're moving other elements onto the stage, you walk around the stage, sort of stumbling and weaving.
You don't want me to do that now?
No. But again, why? What is that exactly? Why are you doing that?
It's the music is hitting me. I mean, I'm serious. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It happened the first time in a rehearsal where I have the tape that I play on a little tape player, and that provides the rhythm track. And at some point, I programmed in for it to do little drum fills, but I'd forgotten when they happened. And so when I'm playing along and singing, then these things would happen, and I felt like I was being slugged. I've got kind of reeled back.
Yeah.
Whoa, there goes another one.
Yeah. You may need a checkup. You know, you mentioned the rhythm on the video or on the audio tape you use there, but that's really a very exciting part of your music is the I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's a rich texture of rhythms you don't normally hear in music, right?
Gosh, thanks.
Thank you. You got to be very happy. This is a swell piece of work here.
I am. I'm pretty happy about it.
Explain the jumbo suit.
Family size. It was an inspiration I had when I was in Japan, and a man over there told me, you know, in the theater, everything should be a little bit bigger than real life. He was referring to, I think, gestures and the way you talk and whatnot. I thought, oh, wow. That solves my costume problem right there.
Sure. Well, again, visually, it's very effective.
Thank you.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
I'm working on another, I suppose it's a film project. It's...
I'm in the phone booth, it's the one across the hall. If you don't answer, I'll just bring it off the wall. I know he's there, but I just tried to call. Leave me hanging on the telephone. Leave me hanging on the telephone.
Blondie, with their siren-like blonde-haired lead singer, Debbie Harry, was another New York band that you might not at first associate with punk. Fronted by Debbie Harry, Blondie was another incendiary band from New York's punk scene. Looking back on that period in her life, Harry, who is now 77, believe it or not, has explained how she created her lead singer persona. She was a character I invented, she said. It was the same thing that Bowie did. I was playing at being a cartoon fantasy on stage. It was a Marilyn Monroe kind of thing. For her part, she never pretended she wasn't being old, and she never pretended that she didn't like it. But then, in punk's way, she never took herself too seriously either. Debbie Harry was raised in Hawthorne, New Jersey by adoptive parents. After college, she moved into Manhattan, living in a gritty $64 a month apartment on St. Mark's Place. Prior to her career in music, she worked as a model, a secretary for the BBC, a Playboy bunny, and a clerk at a head shop. She said that none of it was satisfying. Quote, music was always a huge, haunting influence. I wanted to be in the art world. I felt I should be making music. End quote. Eventually, she did meet up with Chris Stein, another art college grad like herself. Stein has described himself at 17 as a hippie weirdo. In that era, he had a band that opened for the Velvet Underground. Another early inspiration was the band we talked about earlier, the New York Dolls, who she once described as funny and nasty and naughty and everything I needed at the time. Soon, Stein and Harry were the it couple, hanging out at New York's underground rock club, CBGB, the club they would soon help make famous in New York's punk scene. The first Blondie album was released in '76. By then, Harry was 31 and Stein was 27, really old for punk standards. They added 4 more guys to the band: keyboardist Jimmy Destry, bassist Nigel Harrison, drummer Clem Burke, and guitarist Frank Infante. With great songs and a perfected look, dark suits, skinny ties, mod hair. The songwriting took a leap with key contributions from Destry and Harrison and Infante, and it just took the addition of their Aussie producer Mike Chapman to strike the spark that ignited the band's career. Major hits for Blondie included Heart of Glass. And they followed it up with another one, Call Me. In 1980, they released The Tide is High, which was a cover of a 1960s ska band called The Paragons. This song, and their next hit, Rapture, got people talking about how Blondie were appropriating black music. Well, shit. If you were going to make that point, there wouldn't be any white people in popular music at all, would there?
Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. Milton, pot of thieves, wild cord of my sleeve, thick heart of stone. My sins my own, they belong to me. People say beware, but I don't care.
Right along with Debbie Harry, Patti Smith was another one of the rare women in New York's punk scene. Very male-dominated. Also like Blondie, Patti made her reputation with forceful shows at the same club, at CBGB's. More underground than Blondie for sure, Patti presented simplicity of musical style. Many of her songs were sheer performance art, her poetry set to music. As Patti Smith once said of punk, I was young, but I felt our cultural voice was in jeopardy and needed an infusion of new people and ideas. I didn't feel like I was the one. I didn't consider myself a musician in any way, but I was a poet and a performer, and I did feel that I understood where we were at, what we'd been given, and where we should go, and if I could voice it, perhaps it could inspire the next generation.
I just do what I want, or I don't do it. It doesn't mean that I'm not open to things, but if I have a vision, I have to follow that vision, and at whatever cost. I first vowed to myself that I would be an artist, or at least follow a calling within the arts when I was 12. My father took us to an art museum in Philadelphia, and I saw Picasso's for the first time. And when I saw these Picasso's, I don't even know what came over me, but I was so transfixed, and I felt that's what I want to do. I want to do that, whatever that is. It didn't mean that I wanted to paint like Picasso. It just meant to give myself to this kind of vocation. And it changed my life. I mean, I was still the same kid, same skinny, lanky, clumsy kid who just read all the time and liked to run through the fields with her dog. But in my head, I had a new profound joy that I was going to pursue this world. And it wasn't just that I was going to go toward it. I really felt like it called to me. It was a really beautiful moment.
Patti's vibe was all peasant. In some ways, Patti was working the same antisocial subject matter territory that the Ramones had played at. Patti sang about rebellion and self-expression. Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine, she declares in her own version of the band Them's song Gloria. In songs like Gloria and Free Money, she celebrated individuality and breaking away from social constraints. Patti was like a female Lou Reed. Both of them have been dubbed punk's poets. Songs like Piss Factory placed a spotlight on her poetic strengths, where she often incorporated spoken words into her songs.
$16 and time to pay off. I get this job in a piss factory inspecting pipe. 40 hours, $36 a week, but it's a paycheck, Jack. It's so hot in here, hot like Sahara. You could faint from the heat, but these bitches are just too lame to understand. Too goddamn grateful to get this job, to know they're getting screwed up the ass. All these women that got
like
no
the punk
teeth.
Bob Dylan, who himself was like a hippie Allen Ginsberg. Patti was a social activist. And in songs like People Have the Power and Dancing Barefoot, Patti bravely addressed heavy issues like war, poverty, and discrimination. As the 70s ran headlong into the 80s, American youth found new things to feel angry about. While the last generation of teens had cut their snotty little teeth on Watergate and the rise of disco, this new batch was getting fed foie gras style on a daily diet of Ronald Reagan illegally intervening to stop counter-revolutionaries from top-billing authoritarian dictators in countries like Nicaragua. Reagan's military spending was escalating the threat of a global nuclear war with the USSR, and the world felt more every day like the doomsday clock was getting closer and closer to midnight. This might be a good time for us to get off the East Coast. Let's hop a jet and fly to the West Coast now and see what's happening in California. The 1980s punk scene there is a great place to experience some of the major cultural forces that were coursing through music during the decade. So let's go taste some rotting vegetables with the Dead Kennedys. From San Francisco, the Dead Kennedys were known for their searing, sarcastic social commentaries on topics like racism, unemployment, nuclear war, and police brutality. The title of their first album, Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, released in 1980, pretty much tells you where they were coming from. Musically, the Kennedys put punk, surf, and hardcore in a blender, and then they served up some pretty rancid cocktails while influencing countless bands. This song, Holiday in Cambodia, is from Fresh Fruit. It criticizes the ignorance and the arrogance of Western society while reflecting on the horrors of the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. The Kennedy style of punk is a pretty big step away from what was happening in New York with Blondie, the Talking Heads, and other bands. They were definitely part of a bigger trend that rejected mainstream music, and in this way, they were more closely aligned to English bands like the Sex Pistols and the Clash. Obviously, their lyrics indicate they also were in line with the way other bands were more socially and politically charged. Of course, you can see this really clearly in what Patti Smith was doing at the same time. Now this song is called Kill the Poor. It incinerates wealth inequality and capitalist exploitation. It's a tough-as-nails example of how the punks were strongly anti-establishment. The Kennedys are a good band to showcase some major aspects of the punk movement. Let's start with the do-it-yourself, DIY attitude. Punk was about creating art and music on its own terms, without all the accepted rules and requirements that came from the mainstream music industry. It was about taking control and building a new community of like-minded people. Punk was about not letting lack of training get in the way of saying what you wanted to say, even if, like the Ramones, you basically had nothing to say. DIY was producing an album for $6,000. That's how much the Ramones spent on their first album. Compare that to the $150,000 that Zeppelin produced Presents for in the same year. Waving your personal values like a flag, the Kennedys were a straight band, but they supported LGBTQ rights in an age where that was still really not even discussed. They could be pretty offensive with a lot of the things that they did, and they found themselves in the crosshairs of Tipper Gore's Parents Music Resource Council after the band's album Frankenchrist was released. A poster inside the album was unlike any poster that any band had ever included in their packaging before. Jella Biafra, the band's lead singer, described it as, quote, Reagan America on parade. And it featured a repeating series of images, an erection inserted into an anus. The outraged prosecuting judge said the artist was in league with the infamous Son of Sam serial killer Richard Ramirez, who saw people as objects to hurt. Here's Jello interviewed during the congressional hearings.
Now you're in court because your album Frankenchrist has a deemed pornographic poster in it.
Within the context of the record, it's very clear that it's not just supposed to tee-hee, there's some body parts or anything like that. It's the ultimate portrayal, to me, the strongest piece I've ever seen that says here we are as a society, the me generation, the yuppie mentality, the people who would be willing to traffic in arms and genocide all over the world just to make a buck, that kind of thing. Here we all are screwing each other in more ways than one.
The Dead Kennedys were required to post a warning sticker on that album's cover, so they wrote, quote, "Some people may find the poster shocking, repulsive, or offensive. Life can sometimes be that way," end quote.
The image had to be horrific in order to portray it as being the ugly thing that it is, so that maybe people would want to do something about it, get themselves out of that food chain. We don't have to be part of that food chain in order to survive and have some kind of fulfillment of the soul. What they're trying to do also, the prosecution here, is set the kind of legal precedent where it isn't just the over-the-counter seller who can be prosecuted for obscenity or what they call harmful matter here, that you can go after anybody. The guy who sat in the office and had nothing to do with the recording of the record, they're trying to put him on trial. They tried the owner of the record pressing plant that stamped out the vinyl. He was dismissed for lack of evidence, as were 3 other defendants, but we're still here. And so what they hope to accomplish is to set the kind of ugly chain of precedents where even if you walk out and get coffee for the director of a movie that someone else puts an X rating on, later on, you could be prosecuted for the whole movie.
Guilty by association?
Yes, in other words, guilt by association to the point where people won't want to associate to create good art. They'll be scared, and for good reason.
From the other end of the state, Black Flag was a hardcore punk band. And like the Dead Kennedys, they were also known for their own aggressive, politically charged lyrics and no-surrender attitude. Black Flag peaked in '81 with Henry Rollins on vocals and noise virtuoso Greg Ginn on scouring pad guitar. Forming in 1976, Black Flag was one of the earliest and eventually one of the most influential hardcore punk bands. If you took punk, heavy metal, and a little jazz, mixed it with glass and nails, and then ran all of that through a blender, you'd probably get a good sound alike. They released 6 albums through the years, but the first one was never bettered. It was called Damaged. This wasn't an album that meant to make you feel good. At that time, it sounded like a raw, blistering assault on the senses. A musical Molotov cocktail that you hoped wouldn't explode in your hand, but it might. All energy and thoroughly pissed off social commentary. Tracks like this one, Rise Above, are anthems of rebellion, daring you to join their chaotic mosh pit. Black Flag were also capable of writing slower and more disturbing tracks like TV Party, a sarcastic laugh at the mind-numbing emptiness of consumerism, or this gentle lullaby called Depression. An auditory kick in the teeth, the song made you wanna, in the poetic term of the day, fuck shit up. Isn't this just a beautiful piece of music, y'all?
Got a hold of me,
punk, dressed up as Americana, is what you're hungry for, Los Angeles had plenty of that in the early 80s too, served up by a band called X. They were as primally poetic as The Doors, and as seamy as a Pulp Fiction novel. X emerged from the sun-drenched sprawl of LA in the late 70s. In a town that was all about worshiping the illusion of perfection, X sank their teeth deep into the alienation and decay simmering right below the bullshit. Distinct from a lot of the bands that played the same punk clubs X did, they were a ferociously tight band, driven by Billy Zoom's dumpster-diving rockabilly guitar and the harmonies of John Doe and Exene Cervenka. X served up a wholly unique mix of punk and rockabilly. Billy Zoom's stinging guitar lines and DJ Bone Break's drumming drove the band's songs forward with relentless energy. And then they'd throw you a whiplash-inducing left turn, turning from blitzkrieg slam fests to a remarkably tender ballad. This was a punk band that was not afraid to inject their music with moments of haunting melody and unexpected subtlety. X were also better lyricists than a lot of other punk bands. They weren't interested in simple slogans. They were better than that. Compare X on this song, Los Angeles, with Rise Above. The song, Los Angeles, describes a woman who had grown to hate LA so much that she'd become a raving racist, a homophobic anti-Semite who had to leave LA. She eventually had a nervous breakdown while living in London. In a 2017 Rolling Stone interview, Doe said she'd just gotten fed up with it. She'd lived there for a couple of years and she became more and more racist. And to be honest, there was a lot of shock value intended in the lyrics. I wanted to show the dark side or underbelly of Los Angeles, Doe said. X could paint in a broad range of sound colors, too.
Sterilize hypo to shoot a sex machine drug. They got 24 hours. Shoot off all his between the legs. 96 tears through 24 hours. Sex once every hour.
In 1981, they released Wild Gift, adding country and blues to their punk foundation. The songs on that album were a pretty far step away from where they had been just a year earlier. And then, X took their sound in a darker and more introspective direction with their third album, Under the Big Black Sun. It explores alienation and loss, and is another brilliant pairing from Doe and Cervenka. If you've heard anything today, hopefully, the idea that punk was super plastic in the way that it could shapeshift and fill nearly every identifiable music form you could imagine has sprung forth. I've done my job if you've got that idea. There's been anarcho-punk that lionized political anarchy, art punk like the music of television, and the Velvet Underground. Hardcore punk like Bad Brains and Black Flag. Think of pop punk and Blink-182 or Green Day. There was ska punk, maybe best realized in the English band The Clash. And then bands like the Blasters and the Minutemen, they cranked out a form called cowpunk. And like I mentioned with Black Flag, there was even the swing of jazz punk, which the Minutemen dabbled in now and again. And so did Sonic Youth. But maybe some of my most personal favorite stuff was from the folk punk stream.
High school smiles, oh yes. Beautiful girl, love your dress. Where she is now, I can only guess. Cause it's gone, daddy gone. Love is gone, it's gone, daddy gone. Love is gone, it's gone, daddy gone. Love is gone, it's gone, daddy gone. Love is gone away.
The Violent Femmes were one of those bands. They practically invented the folk punk genre. Their debut album, released in 1981, was called Blister in the Sun. This is their song Gone Daddy Gone from that album. Discovered by the Pretenders' original lead guitarist, James Honeyman Scott, the Femmes, as fans call them, hailed from Milwaukee, where they started out playing on street corners. Over 43 years after its release, Blister in the Sun is still one of the most influential and best-selling debuts of all time. The Femmes built their sound around sparse and playful instrumentation and the quirky, compelling lead vocals done by Gordon Gano. So folk punk came in lots of flavors. There were Irish bands like the Pogues with their frontman Shane MacGowan, and later Flogging Molly, who sound Irish but actually come from my neck of the woods in LA. While the Pogues are no more, Flogging Molly is still helping people toss back a Guinness or 5 on any given night. This is the Pogues song, though, If I Should Fall from Grace with God.
Let me go down in the mud where it's all dry. This line was always ours, was the proud line of our fathers that belongs to us and them, not to any of the others. Let them go, boys, let them go, boys. Let them go down in the mud where it's all dry.
Shane MacGowan was the face and the spirit of the band, and he lived up to the worst stereotypes of an Irish male. Their last live shows were in 2015, and Shane died this past November in 23. The immediate cause was pneumonia, but he'd been fighting viral encephalitis, and really you might say he had been slowly dying for a really long time from being a wee bit over fond of the drink, you know. But as they say, an Irishman is never drunk as long as he can still hold on to a blade of grass and not fall off the face of the earth. Gogol Bordello, a band founded by an expat Ukrainian named Eugene Hoots, who left Ukraine after Chernobyl, probably a good time to get out of there, and moved to New York. He formed his band in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, playing something he calls gypsy punk. This is his song, Immigraniata. Their sound is a mashup of Romani and Ukrainian music mixed with punk and dub. They use things like you don't see much around anymore, like sax and violins, which reminds me of an old joke, and if you meet up with any of my friends, they can probably tell you about it. Plus accordion, or as Pete Townsend once called it, a squeeze box. The band's name, Gogol Bordello, is another nod to Eugene's roots. Nikolai Gogol was a classical Ukrainian writer who smuggled Ukraine's culture into Russian society. Eugene Hoots planned to do the same with this gypsy punk, only he plans on breaking it open wide in the English-speaking world. Bordello is an Italian word for a house of ill repute. By the way, if you're in California and catching this podcast soon after its release, there's a really good chance you can catch Gogol Bordello live this May. They're playing 5 nights up and down the coast from May 18th to May 25th. And as far as live concerts go these days, tickets are almost not extortionately overpriced. So what can I say to wrap this one up, guys? Punk, like just about every other form of popular music there probably ever has been, was initially feared and despised by the parents. And like all the music that came before it, this is one of the things that kids like the most about it. And like the other genres, we can see some impressive ways that punk actually impacted society. For an outsider's genre, remember the musicians and the fans are from the edges of society. Its influence is definitely outsized. Punk did gradually gain respect for its artistic and social significance. Some critics highlighted its raw energy and social commentary. It challenged our status quo. It encouraged critical thinking about power structures, and it gave voice to the outsiders. I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode as much as I had fun pulling it together for you. Like always, you can learn lots more about the musicians and the movements that gave rise to punk by referencing any of our sources. They're all listed on our Facebook page. Search for American Song Podcast. Also, if you'd like to get in touch with me directly, leave a comment on the page and I'll reply back. This is Joe Hines for American Song. I'll see you next time.
Don't wanna be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under the new media. And can you hear the sound of hysteria? The subliminal mindfuck America.
We're thinking seriously as a country about putting somebody back in the White House who mounted a violent effort to overthrow the government the last time that he was voted out, who says that parts of the Constitution should be terminated, who says he wants to put the U.S. military in American cities. He wants to build camps for tens of millions of people, right? Like, that's what we're thinking about doing. There's like this huge yikes factor when it comes to him. But part of the reason he wants to destroy the rule of law and thinks that parts of the Constitution must be terminated is because in cases like this, where he's facing more than 30 of the more than 80 felonies he's charged with, it just seems plain that the evidence is very, very, very strongly against him. And so on top of the scariness about what he's offering us as a political figure, on top of his likely criminal liability in these multiple criminal trials, we also then just get this yuck factor stuff, right? I mean, she's doing a porn company promotion at a golf tournament. His infant son is 4 months old. He has his bodyguard ask her if she'd like to have dinner, so she goes to his room. There is no dinner. He's wearing satin pajamas. She says, get dressed. He tells her, I'll get you onto my reality competition TV show and I will help you cheat at it, right? He gives her he says, I'll give you advance notice of the challenges on the show and that will help you. He tells her, oh, me and my wife don't sleep in the same room. He asks her when she was last tested for sexually transmitted diseases. He tells her she reminds him of his daughter. She goes to the bathroom, she comes out of the bathroom and he is stripped down to his underpants. And she tries to leave and he steps between her and the door. And she doesn't want to do it. She says she doesn't feel threatened, but he says to her, I thought you were serious about what you wanted. If you ever want to get out of that trailer park. They have sex. She is not into it. He does not wear a condom. That is particularly concerning to her, and he should know that it is because she has just explained that to him about her work in the adult film industry. They meet several more times. He makes more sexual advances. They never have sex. again, and ultimately it is only when he finally says, no, I'm not putting you on my TV show, that she stops picking up his calls. I mean, that's the character. I mean, Jimmy Carter almost lost in 1976 because he said he'd committed lust in his heart. But this is who we're thinking about putting back in the White House right now, along with what he is threatening to do to the country, in part out of anger for the criminal liability that he has brought on himself by trying to cover up things like this, behavior like this, character like this.